Under the burning colors of twilight, when the horizon bled shades of crimson and gold, a silence stretched between two souls who never thought they would stand this close. The desert wind carried the faint scent of dust and wild sage, whispering secrets that had lived longer than either of them. Her heart raced faster than her breath, but her voice, when it finally broke the silence, came out fragile, almost trembling. "I can't pretend. I love you." The words slipped from her lips like a confession that weighed heavier than the world around them. He stood a few steps away, still as the earth beneath their feet, his gaze steady and unreadable. The Apache warrior's eyes carried no need for words, no rush to answer. They held stories of survival, of battles fought, of an identity carved into the rugged land itself. Yet in that moment, when her honesty pierced the quiet, his gaze spoke with a force that made her knees weak. It was not just a stare, it was an answer, a truth, and perhaps a warning all at once. For days their paths had wound together against the pull of fate. She, a stranger from a world of comfort and fragile rules, and he, a man born of the earth, bound to traditions older than the rivers that cut through the canyon. They had clashed at first, their words sharp, their silences heavier than the sky. But somewhere between stolen glances and unspoken understanding, the air shifted. Now, as dusk settled, it was no longer about who they were, but what they were becoming in each other's presence. Her voice cracked under the weight of what she had admitted. She had never spoken such words aloud before, and certainly not here. To him. She thought the desert would swallow the sound, but instead, it lingered, echoing between them as though the canyon walls themselves held onto her confession. Every second he remained silent felt like an eternity. Did he understand? Did he feel the same? Or would he let her words drift away like smoke from a dying fire? His gaze locked with hers, unwavering, and she felt exposed under its strength. It was not rejection. It was not acceptance. It was something deeper, something that words could not carry. The firelight flickered nearby, shadows dancing across his face, revealing scars, lines, and untold stories. She wanted to know them all, yet feared the truth at the same time. The way he looked at her stirred something she couldn't explain, something between danger and safety, like standing at the edge of a cliff and trusting the wind not to let you fall. The night thickened around them, the sound of distant coyotes breaking the silence. She thought of everything that had led to this moment. The long rides under the blazing sun, the quiet exchanges where words failed, but presence was enough. The way she had caught herself watching him when she thought he wasn't looking. And now here she was, confessing what she never planned to say, what she never thought she could admit to herself. He finally took a step closer, his boots pressing into the dry earth, slow and deliberate. The distance between them shrank, but the silence grew louder. His expression didn't change, but the air shifted, carrying with it an unspoken electricity. She swallowed hard, unsure if she wanted him to speak, or if she feared what his answer might be. His eyes held her in place, commanding and tender all at once, and she felt as though the entire desert waited for his response. The fire crackled, sparks flying upward like fleeting stars, and she realized she was holding her breath. His gaze lowered for a moment, lingering on her trembling hands, before meeting her eyes again. She thought she saw something soften, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Every heartbeat pounded in her ears, every second stretched into forever. Would he break the silence with words that would change everything? Or would he walk away, leaving her confession to hang in the night air, unanswered and unfinished? And just as the question burned the loudest in her chest, he drew in a slow breath and parted his lips, yet no words came. Only the steady gaze remained, deeper, stronger, pulling her into a truth she wasn't ready to face. The night swallowed the moment whole, leaving her caught between hope and fear. love and silence, in a place where the next heartbeat could change everything. Phew. Air felt different after the words left her mouth, like the night had stopped to listen. The silence between them was no longer empty. It carried breath, heat, and the new weight of truth. She waited for him to speak, to make everything simple, but simplicity never belonged to this land. He didn't move for a long stretch, then, without a sound, he nudged the nearest branch with his boot and smothered the fire. Darkness folded around them like a cloak. Only the desert moon held them in a pale, watchful light. The Apache's steady gaze didn't waver. If anything, it deepened, as if asking her to hold on to the quiet a little longer, to trust it. She wanted to. She also wanted answers. She remembered the day she first came to the canyon, and the way the heat had pressed on her shoulders, until her thoughts felt slow. She had come with a letter, tucked in the lining of her bag, and a broken compass she couldn't leave behind. The letter was from her father, written in a rushed hand, full of warnings and regret. It said to avoid the survey crews, to ignore the rumors about a lost well and buried markers, and to find the one person who would know what to do. No name, only a sign. The stone with 4 cuts. She didn't know what that meant then. She knew even less that afternoon when she wandered off the road and the horizon spun. He found her before the sun went down, silent as a shadow, offering water, not words. Back then he kept his distance. He had the air of someone who had learned that distance was a kind of care. He watched the land more than he watched her, and she learned to follow his eyes across the ridge, past the cottonwoods, toward a bend in the river where birds rose at dusk. When he did look at her, it was direct, like now, and it always stirred something steady and new inside her. It wasn't a simple love story. It felt like a path they stepped onto without noticing, a path that ran between danger and safety. She told herself she was here for answers, for the truth about the letter, for the mystery her father left behind. But when she confessed, "I can't pretend I love you," she knew it was no longer only about the past. He finally spoke, low, and even, "Not here." Then he pointed toward the darker edge of the wash. She nodded and followed, careful with each step, the soft crush of sand the only sound. Coyotes called from far away, thin and lonely. Farther, the faint hum of engines drifted. On the wind. She thought of the men she had seen at the roadside diner a day earlier. Boots, bright new hats, laughing like they had already won something. They had stared at her map when they thought she wasn't looking. One of them had an emblem stitched on his sleeve, a stylized sun. She had seen the same emblem burned into a fence post near the canyon entrance. It made her skin crawl. They slipped into the shadow of a rock wall and paused. He tilted his head. She heard it too. Another sound, not animal, not the wind. A clink, metal on metal. Her heart thudded. He made a quick sign with his hand. Wait. They stood still a full minute, maybe more. Whoever made that sound moved away. Footsteps faint, deliberate. The land swallowed the noise. He exhaled. She did too, realizing she had been holding her breath. The suspense didn't leave. It only moved in closer, settling behind her ribs. "We shouldn't light fires," he said. "Not tonight." He looked at her hands. They still trembled. "You're safe with me." Safe. The word hit a soft place. She wanted to ask the question she feared most. "Do you feel what I feel?" But the night pressed a finger to her lips. "I didn't plan to say it," she murmured. "It just happened," he nodded, not unkindly. "Some things don't ask permission." His gaze moved to the line of hills. "But there's trouble here. It's bigger than you and me." She could accept that. She'd known there was trouble from the moment she read the last line of the letter. "Don't trust the ledger men. Find the stone with 4 cuts." The words had scraped something raw inside her. She had grown up in rooms with windows that didn't open all the way, with soft carpets and quiet clocks. The desert belonged to a different world, yet it felt like a true one. Her father had chased work out here when she was a child, surveying lines that sliced up maps. He sent postcards with sun-faded edges and wrote about sky and silence. He never wrote about the people whose land those lines crossed. He never mentioned an Apache who could track a hawk's shadow across the canyon floor. She wondered if guilt had pressed his final note onto paper. She wondered if he had tried to fix the wrong he helped draw. They walked along the arroyo, their steps careful on loose stone. He moved like he belonged to the dark, like the dark trusted him. She tried to match his rhythm and failed, then tried again. "Why did you help me that first day?" she asked at last. He shot her a look that wasn't sharp, just clear. "An elder asked me to watch. Outsiders were wandering through the old sites. Some were curious, some meant harm. I saw you. You looked lost, not dangerous. A beat. And you had something with you." Her fingers went to her pocket before she could stop them. The broken compass. Its face was cracked in a neat spiderweb, the needle stuck between north and almost north. He had noticed it after all. "It was my father's," she said. "I know." He said it without surprise. "I knew him." The world tilted. "You, what?" He didn't slow. "He came here years ago with others. I never learned all their names, but I remember his face. He asked questions, and then he stopped asking. He came back once, alone. He wasn't like the rest by then." "Did you talk to him?" "For a little while." He hesitated, then added, "He didn't belong here, but he cared what happened here. That made things complicated." Complicated. The word was a small room that held too much. "Why didn't you tell me you knew him?" she whispered. "You didn't tell me about the letter. Not anger. Just fact." "We were both waiting." She swallowed. "It said to find the stone. With 4 cuts. Does that mean something to you?" His eyes flicked to the right, toward a low ridge. "Yes." He led her toward it, up a narrow path scored by rain. The climb stole her breath, but she kept going. At the top, the land fell away into a basin dotted with sage. In the center stood a boulder as tall as a house, its surface worn smooth by time, 4 deep grooves cut into it like scars. The sight sent a strange heat through her. She touched the compass again, as if it could confirm what she was seeing. He stopped a few steps back, as if stepping too close would be disrespectful. "Those marks are old," he said. "Older than anyone. Who argues about them? They tell where a boundary is, land, story, responsibility. Your father asked about them. He listened. That mattered." She moved closer to the stone. The grooves were clean, almost precise, but softened at the edges by wind and years. "He said there were people who wanted to change the lines," she said. "He said they had maps no one else could see." "Ledgermen," he said. "They draw lines because paper lets them. The land has its own lines." A voice rose from the basin, faint but sharp. She froze. Another answered. She ducked behind the boulder and looked to him. He had already moved, into the shadow of a juniper, body low, eyes alert. She could make out 3 figures moving below, their shapes cut out of the moonlight. 2 carried long cases. The third had a tablet glow bright on his palm. Their words traveled in pieces on the breeze. "She has the key. Before sunrise. He won't interfere." Her mouth went dry. She thought of the diner, of the emblem, of the way one man's eyes had lingered on her hands. She pressed the compass hard enough to feel its cracked glass bite her skin. Key. Was that what they believed she had? She eased toward him, heart knocking. He leaned close enough that she felt the warmth of his breath at her ear. "Stay low, don't run. They'll hear rocks move," he whispered. Do you think they saw us? No. He sounded sure. Not yet. They waited. The men crossed the basin, stopped near the boulder's base, and set down the cases. The latches clicked open. 1, 2. Metal glinted. The tablet's glow brightened. Her stomach twisted. She didn't want to guess what was inside the cases. She also didn't want to be right. They're not supposed to be here, she said. They know, he said softly. That's why they came at night. The men spoke again, quicker now. Coordinates, map overlay, no more delays. One of them kicked at the ground like a child testing a locked door. Dust lifted, pale in the moonlight. Another pointed toward the grooves on the stone and laughed under his breath. He touched her sleeve, grounding her. Your father hid something he didn't want them to find, he said. I think you already know that. She thought of the compass, the way the back plate never sat quite right against the body. Weeks ago, in a nervous moment, she had pried at it with her fingernail and felt something shift. She hadn't told anyone, not even him. She'd been afraid of what it might mean, afraid of what it would demand. She looked at him now, throat tight, and slid the compass into his palm. Open it, she whispered. He didn't move right away. The men below were still talking, a restless shuffle of words. He cupped the small metal shell, turned it once, twice, then pressed at the seam with a long, patient thumb. The back eased free with a soft click. Inside lay a thin, folded square, edges sweat-soft, almost weightless. He didn't unfold it. He looked at her first, searching. She nodded. He opened the paper. It wasn't a map, not exactly. It was a drawing of the basin from above, done in a quick hand, with 3 circles marked in charcoal, one at the boulder, one to the east by a cluster of shrubs, one near the river bend. Between them ran lines that were not straight, lines that curved the way water curves. And there, in the upper corner, was the same emblem she had seen on the men's sleeve, not printed, but crossed out in hard strokes. Beside it, a single word. No, he breathed out, a sound she almost didn't hear. Your father tried to stop them, he said. He left this for you to finish. For us, she corrected, surprising herself. The word felt right. He folded the paper again and slid it into a pocket inside his vest. Then we have to move before they do. He nodded toward the cluster of shrubs. There's a place there. We can reach it if we skirt the ridge. And the men? Let them chase ghost lines. He started to rise, then hesitated. The thing you said before, he added, voice lower than before. It's not a small thing. It's not nothing. His eyes held hers for a breath that felt like a promise, or a warning, or both. But if we talk about it now, it will get us hurt. She understood. She hated that she understood, but she did. There would be time later, or there wouldn't. Love in a place like this didn't wait for comfort. It learned to live without it. They moved along the ridge, bodies close to the rock, careful with their footing. The basin opened and closed beneath them, a wide, dark lung, breathing. Behind them, one of the men swore. Another told him to keep it down. The tablet glow swung across the boulder and away again. She tasted metal in her mouth. She kept going. As they approached the shrubs, the ground shifted to fine sand. He touched the earth with his fingers, then showed her his hand. A shallow shoe print, recent, not from the men behind them. Someone else had been here. The print faced the river. He studied the track a long moment, then pointed left, toward a fault in the rock, almost invisible. They slipped through and found themselves in a narrow corridor with a low roof of stone. The air cooled. The sound of the basin faded, replaced by the slow, patient song of water moving somewhere out of sight. He stopped at a hollow in the wall. Inside, in darkness barely shaped by moonlight, sat a small clay jar sealed with resin. His face changed in a way she couldn't read. Recognition, relief, grief, all at once. He reached for it, then drew his hand back, as if remembering an old instruction. "My father told you about this place, didn't he?" she whispered. "He didn't," he said quietly. "Someone else did, long before him, long before me." He stared at the jar. "If we open it, we can't put it back the way it was. What's inside? Something that proves a story, is older than their papers, older than their maps. Something they want to say isn't real because it makes their work harder." He looked at her again, gaze steady, unblinking. "If we take it, they'll follow us. If we leave it, they'll break it." Her chest tightened. "Then what do we do?" He didn't answer. He reached for the jar again, fingers firm now. The resin seal gave a tiny, sticky sound as it loosened under his touch. He passed it to her, and the weight surprised her. A quiet weight, like a breath, held too long. She felt the urge to open it right there, to finally see what the mystery wanted from her. The thought of her father's careful no scratched at her mind. That was when the sound came, a clean, cold click behind them, sharp as a snapped bone in still air. Not thunder, not stone. A safety being eased off. "Step away from the wall," a voice said, smooth and almost friendly. "Hands where I can see them. And leave the jar." The voice shifted, angling for him. "You too. Don't make this personal." She didn't turn all the way. She only saw the hint of a silhouette at the corridor's mouth, the suggestion of a raised arm, the black stripe of a barrel. He tensed beside her, every line of him going stone still. The jar felt heavier, the corridor felt smaller. Somewhere outside, water kept singing, patient and old, as if it had seen all of this before and was waiting to see it again. The voice in the shadows carried no urgency, yet it pressed into the narrow corridor like a knife. The sound of the guns' click lingered, sharp and final. She didn't dare move, not even to breathe too deeply. The jar in her hands felt alive, pulsing with every heartbeat. The Apache beside her didn't flinch, his body rigid, his gaze fixed on the dark shape blocking their only way out. The stranger's words, "Don't make this personal," echoed like a lie. This was already personal, though she couldn't yet see why. She tried to catch her companion's eyes, searching for some unspoken plan, but he didn't look at her. His focus stayed on the silhouette at the mouth of the corridor. His stillness wasn't fear. It was the same stillness she had seen when he spotted a hawk circling above the canyon, alert, calculating, waiting for the moment to strike or vanish. That steadiness gave her just enough courage to hold her grip on the jar tighter. She wondered if the man with the gun saw her hands trembling. She hoped not. "You've been carrying something that doesn't belong to you," the voice went. On, lower now, almost persuasive. "Hand it over and no one has to get hurt." The words were practiced, too polished for the desert. This wasn't the rough tone of the men in the basin. This voice belonged to someone who thought himself above them, someone who believed he could talk the world into bending his way. The faint glow of the moon caught on the stranger's sleeve, just enough for her to glimpse the emblem stitched there, the stylized sun again, clear as the one she had seen in the diner. Her stomach tightened. "They've followed us all along," she whispered, just barely enough for the Apache to hear. He didn't answer, but she sensed he already knew. The stranger shifted his weight, the gun never lowering. "This doesn't have to be complicated. You've stumbled into something too heavy for you to carry. Leave the jar, step back, and walk away. If you care for your lives, you'll do it now." The Apache finally spoke, his voice calm but edged with warning. "The land doesn't belong to you. Neither does what's in this jar." The silence that followed was taut, like the pull of a bowstring. Then the stranger gave a short laugh. "The land? The land doesn't care who walks it. Lines on maps decide more than you do, and the lines are moving again. Your people can hold their stories in your hearts all you like, but stories don't. Stop, bulldozers! She felt a rush of anger rise in her chest. The words stung, not because she believed them, but because she could see how often men like this had spoken them and gotten away with it. Her father must have heard the same arrogance. Maybe that was why he left the note, why he told her to look for the stone with 4 cuts. Maybe he had known this day would come. The Apache stepped forward a fraction, enough to block her with his shoulder. His voice stayed even. If you think a story is nothing, then you don't understand why people are willing to die to keep it alive. That quiet statement seemed to weigh more than the gun. The stranger shifted again, the false ease in his posture slipping. I'm not here to argue philosophy. I'm here for the jar. Last warning. The tension in the narrow corridor pressed tighter. She thought of the folded paper hidden in his vest pocket, the compass that had carried it, her father's crossed-out emblem. None of it felt accidental. She wanted to believe they had a choice, that there was some clever way to slip out, to trick the man into leaving. But the gun stayed steady, and the jar, whatever was sealed inside it, seemed to bind them in place. Then a sound cut through the corridor, a soft scrape, then another. Not from the man with the gun. From outside, beyond the rock. Another figure approached. She caught the flicker of movement, a second shadow leaning against the basin wall. She recognized the tall frame, the sharp tilt of his hat. It was one of the men from the diner. Her pulse quickened. They weren't dealing with one intruder. There were more, waiting. The Apache glanced back at her just once, and she understood. The fight wasn't here, not now. Escape meant survival, and survival meant protecting what they carried. She lowered her eyes to the jar, then back to him, silently asking if she should hide it. He gave the faintest shake of his head, almost invisible in the gloom. No, too risky. The stranger with the gun must have noticed the exchange. Don't test me, he said, voice sharper now. She moves again and I pull the trigger. The tension thickened until it was hard to breathe. And yet beneath it, she felt the stir of another conflict, inside herself. She thought of the words she had spoken earlier, the confession that had slipped from her chest without warning. I can't pretend. I love you. They hung inside her still, as alive as the danger pressing in. That truth hadn't gone away. Even now, even here. Love and fear tangled together, leaving her unsure if one made her stronger or weaker. The Apache's gaze never left the man with the gun. You think holding that makes you powerful, he said quietly. But you're the one afraid. The stranger scoffed, but she noticed the small twitch of his jaw. Afraid of what? Afraid of what's in the jar. Afraid of what it means. Because if it proves the story is true, then your maps are lies, and lies don't last forever. The man shifted his grip on the gun, and for a moment, the silence swelled so heavy, it felt like the canyon itself was holding its breath. From deeper, in the basin, another sound carried up, a short, low whistle. The stranger stiffened. The second figure answered with a whistle of his own, and then more footsteps stirred in the sand. Whoever they weren't just searching anymore. They were closing in. She clutched the jar tighter, her heart pounding so loud she feared it would give them away. She didn't know what the jar contained, but she understood now that it was more than clay and resin. It was leverage. It was memory. It was a story someone had tried to erase, and someone else had fought to preserve. And her father had trusted her with it. The Apache leaned just close enough for her to hear, his words a breath against the heavy air. When I move, stay behind me. Don't drop the jar, no matter what. Her fingers tightened around the smooth clay. She nodded, though every part of her wanted to ask what would happen next. She didn't. She swallowed the question, swallowed the fear, and braced for whatever came when he moved. The stranger must have seen something shift in their stance, because he raised the gun higher, angling it squarely at the Apache's chest. Don't, he snapped. Not another step. His voice cracked just slightly, the polish breaking at last, but the Apache's steady gaze didn't falter. He wasn't just looking at the man with the gun, he was looking past him, toward Yai, the basin where more shadows moved, toward the danger waiting in the dark. And though he didn't speak it aloud, she felt the truth settle in her chest like a flame. The real fight hadn't even started yet. The night around them seemed to lean in closer, the desert itself listening as the conflict pressed toward a breaking point. Every breath, every glance, every choice carried the weight of survival and story, love and danger, all balanced on the edge of what would happen next. The silence in the corridor was so sharp, it cut against her skin. The stranger's gun remained steady, his finger twitching near the trigger, but it wasn't only him anymore. She could hear the footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, circling closer with each second. Shadows shifted against the stone, stretching long under the moonlight. There were more of them than she had first thought, and the air seemed to tighten with their presence. The basin was filling with danger, and there was nowhere left to run. She clutched the clay jar so tightly her knuckles ached. It felt heavier with every breath, as if the earth itself had poured its secrets into it. She thought of her father, the compass, the crossed-out emblem on the folded paper. He had carried this same weight, and now it was hers. For the first time, she realized he hadn't trusted her with a simple message. He had trusted her with a responsibility he could no longer carry himself. The Apache's steady presence beside her was the only thing keeping her grounded. His gaze stayed locked on the stranger, his body poised but controlled, every line of him ready to act. Yet he didn't rush. He waited. She could almost hear his unspoken thought. Timing was everything. The man with the gun took a half-step forward, closing the distance. The barrel gleamed faintly in the dim light. "I said put it down," he repeated, his voice rougher this time. "That jar isn't yours. You don't even know what you're holding." She wanted to scream back, to tell him it wasn't his either, that it belonged to the land, to the stories written long before he or anyone like him had come. But her voice stayed locked in her throat. She could only breathe, feel the weight in her arms, and hope that the Apache knew what to do. Then came the whistle again, sharper, closer. The man with the gun stiffened, his attention flicking toward the basin for just an instant. The Apache moved, not a step, not a leap, but a shift, subtle enough to go unnoticed by most eyes. She caught it, though. She felt the air change beside her. He was waiting for the smallest break, and when it came, he would strike. But the enemy wasn't careless. Another figure appeared at the mouth of the corridor, tall, broad, carrying one of the long metal cases they had seen earlier. He set it down with deliberate weight and snapped it open. Inside gleamed cold steel, the parts of something larger, something that belonged to war, not the quiet desert. She didn't know what it was, but the way both men handled it told her it mattered. Her chest tightened. They weren't here to argue or threaten. They were here to take, to destroy, and to prove their maps true by force. And whatever lay sealed in the jar might be the only thing standing in their way. The Apache spoke again, his voice a low rumble in the tense air. "You think you can erase stories. You can't. They live longer than you." The man with the gun sneered. "Stories don't win battles, power does, and right now, power's on our side." He nodded to the second man, who began piecing the weapon together, each metallic click echoing off the stone walls. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She wanted to run, to flee into the canyon's darkness, but there was no path left unguarded. The only way out was through them. The Apache must have sensed her fear because, without looking at her, he shifted again, placing himself squarely between her and the armed men. His stance was protective but also final, as if he already knew the cost of what he was about to do. The jar grew slick in her palms. She imagined hurling it against the rock, shattering it before the enemy could claim it. But something in her resisted. Some instinct told her that would be the same as giving up. Whatever secret it held had been buried for generations, carried by her father, and now protected by this man beside her. To break it would mean breaking the last defense against the maps and lines that sought to erase it. The second man tightened the final piece of the weapon and leveled it toward the corridor. The glow from the tablet illuminated his face, sharp and triumphant. "No more delays," he muttered. Her breath caught. She could feel the climax building like a storm breaking open above them. The air charged, every second stretched to the edge of breaking. The Apache's gaze flicked once toward her, brief but full of meaning. It said everything words couldn't. "Hold steady. Trust me. Be ready." The stranger with the gun raised his voice. "This is your last chance. Step aside. Give us the jar, or the desert keeps your bones." The night seemed to lean in closer, listening. Coyotes cried in the distance, their voices thin against the rising tension. The moonlight burned silver on the boulder, on the grooves cut like scars across its surface, on the barrel of the weapon now trained toward them. The jar in her hands felt like it pulsed with its own heartbeat. And then came the moment she knew would change everything. The Apache shifted his weight, muscles coiling, eyes locked, not on the gun pointed at him, but on the weapon being raised behind it. The desert seemed to hold its breath, balanced on the knife's edge of what would come next. The climax had arrived, and there was no turning back. The gun lifted, the air charged, and then everything broke at once. The Apache moved with a suddenness that felt like the desert wind snapping through dry branches. In one breath, he knocked the stranger's wrist upward, the shot cracking into stone above their heads. Sparks and dust filled the corridor, burning her lungs, but she didn't let go of the jar. She dropped to her knees, clutching it to her chest, while the echo of the gunshot rolled across the basin like thunder. Shouts rose from outside. The other men rushed forward, their footsteps scattering gravel, their shadows stretching longer in the moonlight. The Apache grabbed her arm and pulled her sideways into the rock's narrow fault, dragging her toward the basin's edge. Another gunshot whined past them, stone chips stinging her cheek. She bit back a cry and kept running, her breath ragged, her chest aching, the jar a constant weight against her ribs. They burst into the open, the vast basin spilling before them, moonlight washing the land in silver. The men with the tablet and weapons scrambled to catch up, their voices harsh, commanding. The Apache didn't look back. He led her along the ridge, feet finding invisible footholds in the uneven rock, his movements quick and certain. She stumbled after him, nearly dropping the jar, but his hand steadied her just enough to keep her upright. When they reached the boulder with 4 cuts, he stopped. His breath came heavy, but his eyes were steady. "This is where it ends," he said, low but certain. "Not here with bullets, but here with truth." He pointed to the grooves in the stone. "Your father knew. That's why he marked it on the map. This place is the story." The men closed in, surrounding them from 3 sides, their boots crunched in the sand, their weapons raised. The one with the tablet called out, "You can't stop us. Whatever you're hiding, it doesn't matter. We'll burn this place to the ground if we have to. The maps are already drawn." Her heart hammered, but something shifted inside her. For too long, she had been afraid of what the jar held, of what her confession meant, of whether she belonged here at all. But standing at the stone, under the scarred grooves carved by hands long gone, she felt steadier. She lifted the jar, higher, so the moonlight struck it. "If maps are all you have, then why are you so afraid of this?" she asked, her voice stronger than she expected. The men hesitated, just long enough. The Apache stepped forward, his voice carrying like a drumbeat. "You came here to erase, but you can't erase what you don't understand. This jar holds proof you'll never control. And if you destroy it, the land will still remember. The stories will still outlive you." For a moment, the intruders faltered. The one with the gun shifted uneasily. The one with the tablet hesitated, eyes flicking between the jar and the grooves in the boulder, as though for the first time he wasn't sure what was stronger, his orders or the weight of what stood before him. But hesitation was dangerous. Another man lunged forward, his arm outstretched to grab the jar. Instinct surged in her. She pulled back, almost losing her balance, but the Apache was already moving. With a swift strike, he knocked the attacker's arm away and drove him to the ground. The others raised their weapons, shouting, but the moment had changed. The desert itself seemed to rise against them, the coyotes' cries, the wind whipping through the basin, the stone looming like a guardian. She clutched the jar, tighter, and in that heartbeat she knew what she had to do. She ran to the boulder, pressing the jar against the grooves. The clay vibrated faintly, as if it belonged there, as if it had been waiting for this place all along. With a soft crack, the resin seal broke and the lid loosened. The men shouted, but it was too late. She lifted the lid, and the jar breathed out a dry, earthy scent, like rain on dust. Inside lay rolled parchments, fragile but intact, painted with symbols and lines she couldn't read but knew mattered. They weren't maps of conquest. They were records of rivers, of stars, of the land as it had been known for centuries. Living proof that the land story was older and stronger than any ledger lines. The Apache took the parchments with reverence, holding them high so all could see. "These are the maps," he said, his voice fierce. "The only ones that matter. They prove your lies." The intruders froze, their confidence cracked. The tablet man stepped back, muttering something under his breath. The one with the gun lowered it, just slightly, his hand trembling. They hadn't expected this. They had come for a relic to steal or destroy, not for undeniable truth. She stood tall beside the Apache, her fear falling away. "You can try to take land with paper and machines," she said. "But you can't take what already lives in the stories. You can't take what doesn't belong to you." The silence that followed was heavy, but it was no longer theirs to carry. The intruders backed away, step by step, their weapons lowering as they realized they had lost something greater than the jar. They couldn't erase what had been revealed. The parchments, the stone, the living witnesses. They had all spoken louder than any gunshot. One by one, the men melted into the shadows of the basin, their voices fading into the night. The last sound was the growl of an engine far off, retreating into the dark horizon. The desert grew quiet again, the air lighter, as though it had been holding its breath all this time and finally exhaled. She turned to the Apache, her chest tight with everything that had just passed. The parchments trembled in his hands, but his eyes were steady. He looked at her, and this time there was no silence between them, no unreadable barrier. "Your father believed this should survive," he said. "Now it will." Tears stung her eyes, but they weren't from fear. They were from the weight of knowing she had carried something worth more than herself, and that she hadn't dropped it. She looked at him, the words she had spoken earlier still burning in her chest. "I meant it," she whispered, "what I said before." His gaze softened, the fierce steadiness giving way to something quieter, warmer. He didn't need to say the words back. His eyes, his presence, the way he had fought to protect the story, all of it was an answer she felt rather than heard. The night spread wide around them, the stars fierce and bright, the land breathing steady again. They stood at the boulder with 4 cuts, side by side, with the parchment safe between them. The conflict had been real, the danger sharp, but in the end, the story had survived. And as the desert wind moved across the basin, carrying away the last traces of their enemies, she understood the truth her father had left her to find. Some maps lead only to loss, but others lead to what can never be taken. Love, memory, and the story of a land that speaks louder than words.